right. Thank you so much, Shannon, and welcome back to my studio. Good evening. My name is Bill Platz, and I'd like to reintroduce the rest of our team here for this evening. This is Rachel and Atticus, and they're going to be modeling for us tonight. I'd like to thank Shannon and the qagoma team, but I'd like to thank Shannon in particular for doing the acknowledgement of country, and I would like to share that acknowledgement and also pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet here tonight. And I'd like to extend that respect to any First Nations peoples that might be joining us here this evening too. Tonight is the last, I feel a little nostalgic. About this because this has been such an excellent series, and I want to say thank you to the outstanding work that the qagoma team has done, and also to HSBC for sponsoring this draw along virtual event. But this is the last in this very brief series of life drawing workshops that we're doing from my studio here in Chelmer. And I would like to say thank you to everybody who's joined us throughout the entire series. But if you were here last week, or if this is your first week, welcome. And hopefully you'll enjoy this as well. And you'll get some things out of it. You'll get some tips, you'll get some tricks, but you'll get an exposure to a way of drawing, to a method of life drawing, which hopefully is both, is energetic and gets you interested in life drawing so that you can keep it going after these workshops have concluded. As Shannon said, these workshops will be up on YouTube. You're welcome to go back and watch them and work through them again, and then get out there and engage with life drawing. As in most places around Australia, I know not everywhere in Australia, but in most places we're able to start getting back into doing some work in classes, in studios. We're able to give life models work again and get out there and do some life drawing. I would encourage you to support that wherever you can. I would also like to say that I mentioned it last week, but both the Queensland Art Gallery and the Gallery of Modern Art are open now, and you can go visit. As we've been working through this series in June and now here in August, that wasn't always the case, but we were doing this series when the Queensland Art Gallery opened again, which was fantastic. And then we were doing the series last week just after the Gallery of Modern Art has opened again too. So take some time if you get a chance and go visit the museums, because I know it's been too long since we've been able to do that. And also, as part of this draw along series, the Goma bookshop has put together, the bookstore has put together some drawing resources and some kits that are specific to drawing. So if you get a chance to go to to Goma, stop by the bookstore and take a look at some of the excellent drawing resources they have there too. All right, I am really looking forward to tonight. We've roughly organized this whole series around a kind of chronology, a very loose chronology. I hesitate to even say that, but we started yesterday's bodies, the very first session, thinking about academic life drawing as it came through the academies, particularly the academies of Britain and Australia and America in the 19th century. And then we started to build on post-war life drawing and the gestural mark last week. And now this week in the sudden bodies, and now this week on Unruly bodies, we're really thinking about contemporary life drawing and some of the different methods that we use and some of the things that have become theorized and engaged with that we might have taken for granted in the past, but now are built right into the practice and study of life drawing. And tonight for Unruly bodies, we're going to deal specifically with the topic of erasure and what it means to erase and rub out in a drawing. And I'm going to show you, we're going to learn a few things about erasers. We're going to learn some new methods of working, and I think you'll really enjoy that quite a lot. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to be sharing some of the things that I teach in my day job as a university lecturer and teaching drawing and life drawing. I'm going to be sharing some things that come through my experience as an artist and practicing life drawing for the last 25 years. And hopefully you'll be able to build on our experience here in the studio, in your own experience there at home, and discover some new ways of approaching drawing. All right, so let's start first with looking at some works from the qagoma collection. And I want to look at these works to introduce some of our ideas around erasure and also remind you of a term or introduce you to a term called the palimpsest, P-A-L-I-M-P-S-E-S-T, and talk a little bit about what that word means and the way that it gets used in contemporary practice. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of works from the qagoma collection. We're not actually going to be drawing from these drawings. If you were with me for the series in June, we were looking at drawings from the collection, actually using those as subject matter. We're not going to be doing that tonight. I'm going to be showing you these drawings as references, as points for you to understand some of the things that we're talking about, but then we're going to give it right over to Atticus and Rachel here, and we're going to be drawing directly from them in studio today. All right, so let's flip it over here and let's take a look at this first drawing. Now, when you look at this drawing, this is a drawing by Joy Hester. And Joy Hester is one of my absolute favorites. Are you allowed to say that anymore? You're allowed to express preference, maybe. Joy Hester is one of my absolute favorite artists. Brilliant, brilliant drawings. And I'm showing you this drawing because it really exemplifies this approach to the body that goes beyond, far beyond the idea of academic life drawing. It goes beyond the gestural and starts to think about the body as something which is flexible, as something which can be distorted, and something which is very responsive in your approach to it. It also carries, even though this is an ink drawing, it carries a lot of the hallmarks of a type of drawing that we're going to be doing tonight, which is subtractive drawing using erasure. So I just really wanted to show it to you too, because it's a beautiful Joy Hester drawing in the Qagoma collection. All right, now this next drawing by Frank Hodgkinson, you can see this is actually starting now to carry markers of erasure and this idea of what we call the palimpsest. So if you look at this drawing of her laying down in space, what you'll see if you look at her arm there on the right hand side of the picture, but you look at her other arm on the left too, but especially her arm on the right hand side, you can see the way it's been drawn and redrawn. It's been drawn in charcoal, rubbed back, and then redrawn again. But even though it's been redrawn, you also see that through her hip and buttocks, the way that's been drawn and redrawn. Even though it's been redrawn, you still see that trace, you see that residue of the initial drawing. And that trace or residue we call the palimpsest. And that's a word that comes from the study of old texts, old manuscripts, that really started to engage historians in thinking about not just what was in the text, but what had been rubbed out as well. Because in old manuscripts, in order to erase the text, it had to be scraped with a blade or it had to be washed. But you would still always see some trace, some residue of that initial text. And so scholars became very interested in comparing what had been there initially with what was replacing that text at the end. And so we think about that now as a contemporary strategy where you're not just looking at the final mark, but you're looking at the history of marks that led up to the final mark. And you're interpreting the changes and choices that those artists have made, all right? So again, the palimpsest, that's P-A-L-I-M-P-S-E-S-T. Now, if we go to the next drawing, this one by John Olday. John Olday is a really interesting artist, an artist who grew up when he was a child in New York City, my old stomping ground, and then spent some time in Germany and was British, but then settled in Sydney in Australia in the 1950s for a time. And Olday was a really interesting artist, political activist, political agitator, but engaged a lot with political cartooning and satire and caricature. And this is a beautiful little drawing. And what I love about this drawing, he also was very at home in the cabaret and did lots of costumed figures. And what is really interesting about this drawing, if you look at it closely, is the final drawing of this fantastic character, this expressive character, but you see all of the erasure. You see all of the choices that he's making. So the drawing that was there, then erased, then redrawn, then erased, then redrawn again. And you see the drawing in terms of that history, that experience, and what was chosen by Olday, but what was also chosen to be erased. And that's what we're going to explore here tonight. All right, the final drawing here that we're going to look at by Nalini Malani, who is a Indian artist, is a drawing that shows this experience of washing. So this is the productive quality of erasure. So what we're going to be interested in here tonight is not just seeing erasure as something which is corrective. You make a mistake and then you correct it by erasing and redrawing it, but seeing erasure and washing back and rubbing back as a productive method of building the drawing. So in this particular work, you can see that it's done in dye and chalk and charcoal on this paper mounted on fabric. Then it's been washed over, and as it's washed over, it's both washing away the charcoal, but allowing the charcoal to take on a completely different character in the drawing. So this is erasure as a productive method of drawing, and that's what we're going to explore tonight. Okay, let's bring it back to me here. All right. Now, I'll wait till all y'all can see me again. Am I back? Okay, I'm back. Excellent. So for your materials tonight, If you have charcoal available and you can work in charcoal, that's great. And that'll make it really easy for you to work large and to do a lot of erasing and rubbing back. If you're working in pencil, that's fine too, because pencil will work for this. And just like the old day drawing, you can do some really beautiful things with erasing and pencil. And I'll be demonstrating a little bit of both for you here tonight, a little bit in charcoal, and I'll also show you pencil. I'm going to work primarily in charcoal, not because of a preference for charcoal, but because it'll be much easier for you to see at this distance on this large sheet of paper if I work quite large in willow charcoal. All right, but before we get into that, before we get into drawing, I want to talk just really briefly about erasers. And if all y'all are sitting there at home hoping I'm going to refer to them as rubbers, you're out of luck. All right, so let's talk about erasers. Okay, now the most basic form of eraser that we use in art or in drawing is the plastic eraser. And they're made out of vinyl. They're referred to as plastic erasers. They are a very contemporary form, obviously, because they're made out of vinyl. They come in all sorts of sizes and shapes and colors. Some of them are harder, some of them are softer, but they are just a piece of vinyl. And they work by friction, by rubbing on the piece of paper and taking off your mark. When you're working in charcoal or pencil, those are what we call friable media. They're crumbly, right? The word friable comes from the same Latin root as the word friction. So when you drag your charcoal or your graphite across the paper, that charcoal or graphite is hitting the tooth, the texture of that paper, and it's being crumbled, ground off because of friction. Your vinyl eraser, plastic eraser, when you rub back, is also working by friction to rub that mark back off the surface. That's the most basic type of eraser we have. And if you have your kids' erasers that are shaped like ice cream cones or colored pink or whatever it is, those are all vinyl erasers. The one that I'm holding here in my hand is a basic artist vinyl eraser, which is just a white brick. Now, one of the things that can happen to you with your erasers is they can start to get quite dull. They can start to get quite rounded off, and I'll hold that one up close to the lens. I know it's out of focus, but you can see if you've been working with your eraser for a while, it'll get soft and it'll be hard for you to get in there and make sharp cuts with your eraser. So what you want to do if that happens is go at it with your knife. So if you've got a craft knife, a Stanley knife, handy, you'll see, if you walk into my studio, you'll see all my vinyl erasers, plastic erasers, cut into triangular wedges, like makeup wedges. But if you start to round off that eraser, take your knife and just slice it off so you get a nice sharp eraser edge again. So that's the most basic type, and that's probably the type all of you have if you just grabbed an eraser to use tonight. But there's a few other types of eraser. The other most common eraser that artists use is what's called the kneaded or kneadable eraser. And it's kneaded like you knead bread dough, K-N-E-A-D. And this is a natural gum eraser. It's a natural rubber eraser, and it has oil mixed into it. And again, I know it's out of focus, but I'll hold it up there close. It's this gummy eraser. It's sometimes referred to as putty, eraser putty, and you can mold it and press it and stretch it. And it does have oil in it, which is one of the things that makes it soft and pliable. And you have to be careful of that, because if you keep this eraser resting on your sheet of paper, it'll make a lovely little oily stain on your sheet of paper. But this works by an adhesive, right? So this works by pressing it or rubbing it on your piece of paper, and the particles of graphite or charcoal actually stick to it. And then you knead it up again to get a fresh spot on the eraser, and you press it back in. And so that's a kneaded or kneadable eraser. When you buy them in the shop, because they have oil in them, they'll come wrapped up in plastic, and they have a shelf life, because eventually that oil will dry out and they'll become quite brittle. All right, if you're at home and you have one of these kneadable erasers, feel free to use that, and I'll point it out a few times here this evening. Now, just a couple of other types of eraser really quickly before we get into drawing tonight. I also have this little white eraser, which is just kind of a shape, an ovoid shape like that. This is a natural rubber eraser. And if you had one of those pink erasers when you were a kid, or if you had a pink eraser on the end of your pencil when you were a kid in school, that was a natural rubber eraser. And the way that those work is they have pumice in them. So they actually have a little bit of grit in them so that they can get friction on the paper and rub back off the surface, which is the reason that artists don't really use them anymore, because you don't want to abrade your paper with that pumice or that that's in those natural rubber erasers. The word rubber actually came from Priestley, taking latex from what we now call the rubber tree, realizing that it would rub out pencil and calling it rubber. That's where, so that the word rubber comes from its function as an eraser rather than the other way around. All right, the last one that I want to show you is more of a specialty eraser. And it's this. If you're an architect or a graphic designer out there or an engineer, you might be familiar with this thing right here. This is what's called a drafting pad or a dry cleaning pad. And I'll hold it up close to the camera again there for you, even though I know it's a little out of focus. You can see it's a soft, almost like a muslin cotton bag. And inside of it is natural rubber eraser as a dust. It's got a powder inside it. And the way that you use these pads, for those of you who work in graphite, they can be quite useful, because what you do is you sort of knead it like that in your hand. And when you do that, it actually snows. So these little bits of eraser come down through that bag and they settle on your sheet of paper like a silt. And you get this layer of this eraser dust, these crumbs all over your paper. So if you have graphite powder or smudges, that's what's used. You crumble this all over your paper and then you wipe it lightly with it, and that can lift up the excess. But for those of you who work in pencil, here's a hot tip. Before you do any drawing, or for those of you who do drafting in pencil, you sprinkle this dust on your paper first before you start drawing. And then as you're drawing in your pencil, all the excess graphite dust gets caught up by that. Or if you're rolling tools like rulers and things across the surface, or triangles, they ride on that dust instead of abrading your paper, and therefore they don't smudge. A lot of people who work in pencil portraits will use these to keep the surface very, very clean. So I just wanted to point that out quickly too. As we go through tonight, what you'll see me using almost exclusively is a basic vinyl eraser though, and the Kneadable Eraser. All right, so there was a really brief rundown of erasers. There are millions of other erasers and possibilities and potentials out there. Prior to rubber erasers, artists used bread. And even today, you can use bread. Get a nice piece of the inside of a piece of white bread and mush it up in your fingers, and it makes a beautiful eraser. All right, now let's get on to your first drawing. The first drawing that we're going to do here this evening is called Subtractive Drawing. And it is a way of building up tone in your drawing, where you'll put down a middle tone using your graphite or your charcoal first, and then you're going to draw by cutting back through that with your eraser. So rather than adding line and tone, you're going to be subtracting line and tone. Thus, we call it a subtractive drawing. And it's a way of using erasure as a productive method of drawing. All right, so let me show you how you're going to get it set up for this. Whether you're in charcoal or whether you're in pencil, and I'm going to show you with both here. What you're going to do first on your sheet of paper is you're going to lay down a wash of your material, whether it's the charcoal or the graphite. So I'm going to do that first here. I'm just going to work across my page like that, and I'm going to lay down a tone. All right, now what I'll typically do is work two directions. So I worked horizontally for that first pass. Now I'll work vertically for the second pass. Okay. All right, there we go. Now, what you don't want to do is rub that. You're going to be tempted, I know. You're going to see the texture of that, and you're going to think, I want to get in there and just smooth it all out. Don't do that, all right? Because it'll make it, you'll grind that down into the fibers of the paper. It'll be very hard to erase, to lift back out. So you want to just ride across the surface like that and just leave it as a nice light to mid-tone gray. If you're working in graphite, and I've got a graphite pencil right here, you're going to do the exact same thing. All right, you're going to take that graphite pencil and just work across in one direction and then come back in the other direction. Just like that. And again, I'm not worried about how precise that is, and I'm not going to rub it into the surface at all. I'm just going to leave it on there as a nice light wash. Okay, so I've got my charcoal and my pencil. Then when it comes time to draw, you're going to come back in with your eraser, and whether you have a block of eraser like this, or you just have the eraser that's on the back end of a pencil, or you have one of these little, clicky type erasers, or whatever kind of eraser you have, when Rachel and Atticus take their pose, you're now going to start doing your drawing, both line and light, showing the light in the drawing by erasing, okay? So you're going to be rubbing back. One of the important things for us to think about tonight is that erasing is not punitive, right? It's not a way, you don't use erasing to punish a bad mark, right? We're thinking about erasure as something which isn't a correction, right? We're thinking about it as something which is part of your production. So you're gonna erase back, and then once you've erased back, what you'll be able to do is then take your charcoal and darken up, coming up to those erased marks that you've already made. So you've got that mid-tone, you've lifted out a light tone, and then you can push back down a dark tone. All right, but we're going to start with erasure first, and then we're going to work our way up to building up those tones. If you're working in graphite, it's exactly the same method. If you're working in graphite, you're going to begin with your eraser. You're going to begin working in line and with tone by blocking out with your eraser, and you'll probably want to do this with your plastic eraser, not your kneaded eraser, so it goes more quickly. And then you'll be able to come back in at the end, and you'll be able to bring in some dark graphite along those light edges to really enhance the contrast there between the light and the dark, okay? So step one is to put your wash of charcoal or graphite down on your sheet of paper. If you're going to put it on your entire sheet of paper, you can leave yourself a little bit of border, a little bit of clean white border, so you can grab on to the sheet of paper. It's also a good idea to have a scrap piece of paper or have that clean white border. So as your eraser starts to get gunked up, you can just go over to a clean piece of paper and rub it clean again, and then go back into it. All right. So we're going to put the wash down first. Then Rachel and Atticus are going to take their pose, and we're going to start drawing only with our erasers, subtractive drawing. All right, everybody got that? Let's get it set. Okay, so I'm going to do it over here in charcoal, and I'm just going to go back over that one that I had already started there, give myself a bigger field, so hopefully it's easier for you to see at home. All right, and again, I'm working one direction, and then I'm working back across in the other direction. Okay. And when you're all ready to draw, you should have a nice, big, dry washed field like that, okay? If it's not perfectly even and smooth, that's all right. If you're getting a little bit of the texture underneath it coming through, that's all right. We call that frottage, that rubbing that's coming through. That's perfectly all right. Okay, so once you've got a good big field like that gray field to draw on, you're ready to go. Now these drawings do take a little bit longer. So if you've been with me through the first couple of weeks, we've done some very, very short drawings, some quick drawings. Tonight we're going to be doing some more sustained drawings. They take a little bit longer to develop and to build. All right, so we're going to have, let's go with the stockings too. We're going to have Atticus and Rachel are going to put on some stockings here, long socks, and that will also give you a black graphic point of tension for you to grab onto with these subtractive drawings. And that blackness, I know you have their masks as well that they're wearing, their COVID masks, but you'll be able to use those black legs against the white to really locate them too. And for those of you who are more afraid of drawing feet, now you can just do the shape, all right? And that'll help. All right, so we're gonna start off with a very, very simple pose, nothing too complex. All right, we're going to go with a standing pose. For this pose, you may choose to draw both Atticus and Rachel, or you may choose to draw one or the other. That's completely up to you. Okay, you decide. If you feel a little bit more confident and you want to try to hit both of them, go for it. Otherwise, just choose one or the other. All right, so let's do a simple standing pose, y'all. That looks great. Fantastic. Now, I'm intentionally using these black stockings against a black background too, because you're going to start to get some lost areas, some lost edges in the drawing. Some parts of their body are going to seem to get erased against that black background and then be found again against the white. So you can play a little bit more with that graphic game of the finding and losing of the form. All right, so we good there? Does that feel good, y'all? Okay, Atticus and Rachel are ready. So when you're ready to begin, don't wait for me, just dive right into it and I'll draw at the same time that y'all draw. I'm gonna draw Rachel because as I'm standing here behind my paper, it's harder for me to see Atticus. So I'm gonna draw Rachel there, but again, you choose which of the two models you wanna draw. You may choose to approach this drawing by starting with tone, by blocking out the light areas of their body and doing shapes. Or you may choose to start this drawing with line, So I'm going to, just as an example, start with line as I normally would, you know, if I was working with a stick of charcoal or graphite. And I'm just going to start to really lightly now lay out the body in a kind of contour drawing, drawing edges, right? That's contour, perception of the edges of things. There, thinking about that overall movement and curve of the body. And I'm going to wind up with a really, really light, almost white on gray kind of a drawing of those contours. And I'm not going to worry too much about detail at this stage. All I'm thinking about now is getting in the overall basic shape of what I'm seeing there. And once I have that, then I'm going to start to complicate it a little bit more. Okay? Let's try to stay to the side so you can see me working through it. Okay, as that leg goes back. And I'm also going to do a little thing where I break the top of my frame with the head. Okay, so it goes right up there. All right, once I have that basic frame laid out, is that all right? Can you see that pretty well on the screen there? Yeah, you can. Okay, good. Then I'm going to start to think about the light. Now, when I'm thinking about the light, I'm going to squint my eyes. I'm going to squint way down so that if you're blind like me, you can just lift your glasses up. But otherwise, squint your eyes down so what you're seeing is the pattern of light and dark rather than the detail. And if you squint so you see that pattern, then you can start erasing out and blocking in those points of light that you see. So for me, from my point of view, I see a strong light on Rachel's shoulder. I see a strong light coming down her chest into her breasts. I see a strong light across her abdomen, right? And so I'm just going to start now very, very quickly, all right? I'm not worried about detail, but I'm just going to start quickly blocking out those points of light that I see. Okay. For those of you who are working on Atticus, you'll see that strong light on his shoulder and this arm, on his buttock, on his hand, and just start blocking out those big areas of light. Okay. I see a big area on Rachel's thigh, there, coming down, but then that gets cut off at her stockings. Okay. And a little bit coming down her arm to her hand. Okay. And then up into her forehead. I haven't yet decided how I'm going to handle the mask, but I'll do that in a minute. So you're blocking it out now where you're starting to see, and it should be quite pale. And if it's pale, all right, you've got about a 30 to 40% gray. You're erasing back to about a 15 or 20%. You won't be able to take it all the way back to the white of the paper. That's all right. But you're working with this gray on gray and erasure. So it's staying in these veils of material and erasure. And you want to start building it up that way. Okay, now, in another minute, what we're going to do is we're going to come back in and we're going to reassert the dark with either your graphite or your charcoal. Okay, so once you've got that, and I'm just about there, okay, with her elbow going behind her there. All right, coming down. All right. Give everybody a minute to get to that stage right there. All right. And to wet your whistle if you need to. Okay, then what you're going to do next is come back in with your charcoal or your graphite and now start to build the dark shapes. Don't worry about line. Don't come in now and just draw outlines around everything that you've done. Instead, now start to push the darks. So I'm going to look now, I'm going to start with this beautiful black of the stockings. Okay, so I'm going to start to think about this overall shape. I'm not even going to draw a distinction about where one leg begins and the other leg ends. I'm just going to go overall into the shape. Okay, so I'm starting to build the dark shapes now to bring out the light. All right. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with those black stockings because they give me a good point, graphic point to locate it. All right, but now I'm going to start coming up into the body and I'm going to start looking again. I'm not going to focus on line. I'm going to focus on shape. I'm starting to pull out where I see the dark shape. There. And we're going to do this only for a minute. We're not going to spend too long on it. Just looking around. I'm still squinting my eyes, looking at those shapes. Okay, now I'll give everybody a chance to do that, to work across your drawing and get those darks in. Now, then, as you're building this up, the next thing that you want to do is use the darkness also to pull in the background that's behind them. So that black felt that I hung up behind them, that I hung up for a very specific reason, to absorb all the light and give you that contrast between the background and their bodies. You can come in now and bring that darkness in behind the body in order to emphasize the contour. So instead of drawing the contour as a hard line, you're going to put in the wash, the shape of the background, and that's going to bring that contour forward, that light forward. So I'm going to come now down Rachel's neck and down and around her shoulder and down to where her elbow goes behind her body, like that. And then it further goes down her hip and out to her thigh. And in order to show that shape, I'm going to darken in around behind her, like that, okay? So you should now start to see that side of her body, the light start to emerge out of the dark. So rather than defining that edge with a dark line, you're defining that edge with a light line. And that's the important aspect of erasure here. Now, you can do that on a single side of her body, or if you want to, you can come and bring that in on both sides of her body, or his body if you're doing Atticus. But don't close it in completely. Don't outline the entire thing. Let it breathe. Let that atmosphere that you've created with all that beautiful wash really help to define the figure, all right? So you're going to be erasing, putting in the dark, putting in some sort of a background there, some background wash, and now you're going to be pushing and pulling. So I've got my eraser in one hand, I've got my material, my charcoal or pencil in the other hand, and now I'm going to be adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting, pushing and pulling, to use Hans Hofmann's old term, pushing and pulling that drawing in space like that. Let's take about, how are you guys holding up, all right? Let's take about 4 or 5 more minutes now on this drawing, and now what I want you to do is just go erasing as much as you're drawing, erasing as much as you're drawing. So don't take this last 4 or 5 minutes to just add. Also use it to subtract and to build emphasis in your drawing. All right, let's go. Let's do it. Okay. And if there's an area that you really want to emphasize, like I might want to come down into her abdomen and really create some emphasis, I might actually wash back over that with my dark again so that I can erase back into it again. All right. So pushing and pulling, all right? You push it back down, that value, and then pull it back out again. So I really want to emphasize that light that's coming right down on Rachel's abdomen there, around her navel, and then coming up there. So I'm going to bring a little bit of emphasis right there. And then I want to emphasize that shape of her hip. So I'm going to come in and darken up the background there, around it. Right? So by simply pushing and pulling those values in and out, you're going to start to build your drawing. All right, keep drawing, y'all. And again, you can always bring that value into the background and darken it up if you really want to pop some aspect of the background back out again. All right. Keep it quick and loose. another minute. All right, how are all those drawings going, y'all? I'll stand out of your way. You should, you know, this is, it should feel like there's a lot of just activity going on. Like you're putting the material in, then you're taking it back out, then you're putting it in, then you're taking it back out again. And so you're constantly working back and forth with that eraser and then with your material that you're drawing with. And if you're getting a lot of pushing and pulling, you're doing it exactly right. All right. All right, tick-tock. All right, and we're out. Rachel and Atticus, thank you very much. All right, so that is the basic of subtractive drawing. Subtractive drawing is putting down that wash first so that you establish a midtone, and then drawing the light and drawing the contour with the eraser, and then working back into it with your light and your dark. All right, let's go on to the second drawing that we're going to do here tonight. All right, we'll give Atticus and Rachel a moment here to rest before we go on to the next one. For the next drawing that we do, we're actually going to now do something that was like the old day drawing, where we're going to do a drawing where we do build up some contour. We draw in a way that's a little bit more comfortable, maybe a little less strange than that subtractive drawing was. But then we're going to have Atticus and Rachel do some very slight movements of parts of their body. And we're going to erase and redraw and erase and redraw. And through that erasure, we're going to get a sense of movement, but we're also going to see the history, the development, the trace, the record of its own production in your drawing. And what we'll do is the viewer will then be able to read, okay, the arm was here, and then it was erased and redrawn, and then it was erased and redrawn. And in the interpretation of that, it could be interpreted as movement, it could be interpreted as a kind of gestural difference, and all sorts of things that are happening. All right, so we're going to very intentionally now work on a productive strategy of erasing. So we're not thinking about it as a correction. We're thinking about it as an intentional strategy to show these layers of process and these layers of movement in the drawing. Okay, and again, as I said at the beginning, don't think of this as punishing your marks, right? This isn't punitive or corrective. It's something which is productive. All right, so what we're going to have them do next is we're going to have Rachel and Atticus take some seated poses, all right, where they're going to be close to one another in space, and they're going to hold those poses for about 5 minutes or so. We're then going to have them move just one arm or one leg. And what you're going to do is rub back that one arm or one leg, and then you're going to redraw its new position. And then we're going to have them move again, just one part of their body, and you're going to rub back and redraw. And we're going to start to think of the body as not this static classical thing from the yesterday's bodies point of departure that we had 2 weeks ago. We're not going to think of it as kinetics and moving in space like we did with the gestural drawing. We're now going to think of it as these unruly bodies, these bodies that are kind of spasmodic and they're changing in time and space. And we're going to go through those steps by drawing it and redrawing it. Okay, so Rachel and Atticus are now taking a pose here for us. Excellent. Now, what I'm going to have you do is start. You may draw one of them or you may draw both of them again. I'm going to leave that completely up to you, whether you draw one or both. But what I want you to do now is just a really quick sketch, contour sketch of one of their bodies or both of their bodies. All right? And let's do that in about 4 or 5 minutes. All right, go for it. And I want to draw you both, but I think I'm going to just draw, I'll just draw you again, Rachel. Here we go. Okay. All right. All right, you should be coming towards the end of just that quick sketch. Again, if it doesn't have too much detail in it or anything, don't worry about that. All right, I'm going to give you another minute on that sketch. All right, let's get out of your way there. Okay, now I'm also going to ask Atticus and Rachel to have a think now about making just one arm or one leg move. All right, so for each of them, they're just going to only move one arm or one leg, and they're only going to move it by about 30 centimeters. They're not going to make a massive change, but they're going to just change the gesture, and I might help talk you guys through this a little bit. All right, so everybody should have your sketch there now. Okay, so Atticus and Rachel, let's have you make one limb move in some sort of different pose. All right, there it is. Now, what you're going to do now is come back in either kneaded eraser or your plastic eraser. I'm coming in with my kneaded eraser because I see the movement of Rachel's arm there, and you saw the movement of Atticus's arm too. I'm going to come in, I'm just going to rub back that arm, but of course you'll still be able to see that ghost of the arm. And now we're going to take about a minute or two to redraw that one part of the body. So for me, that's coming in and redrawing Rachel's right arm. For most of you, it'll be drawing Rachel's right arm or Atticus's left arm. All right, let's do it. And in that erasure, I also lost part of Rachel's knee and her face there, which I'm redrawing too. Okay, and then redrawing her arm, I'm going to come back in and also now erase what her arm covers up for me by reaching across her body. So now I can still see the trace of that original arm, and I'm seeing the movement of that arm too, which I've exaggerated quite a bit in my drawing, just for dramatic effect. All right, so take another few seconds on that second position, and then we're going to have them change that same limb again. All right, now we're going to have Rachel and Atticus move that same limb to another new position. All right, so moving those arms again, there we go. All right, and then same thing again. Now rub back a second time. And again, I'm using my kneaded eraser for this, whatever eraser you have. And I'm not being too careful about it. I'm just going to rub back, and now I'm going to redraw again, which is now completely changed for me the position of Rachel's shoulder as well. For you who are doing Atticus, it should be completely rolling his shoulder around. So more of the shoulder. And now, that's for me, it's also Rachel covering up more of her leg too, as that arm hangs down. So I'm also going to have to take out some of her hip. Try to stay out of the way there. And again, I'm going to exaggerate that arm a little bit because it's the limb that's moving. And then redraw in any other parts of the body, which you can see now, which you might not have been able to see before. All right, and another about 30 seconds on this to redraw that new position of the arm. And again, the point of this is not to show that you drew her arm wrong and thus are fixing it or erasing it and fixing it. It's showing that differentiation of gesture in the body. So the way that the body isn't totally static, but the way the body isn't in fluid motion either. All right. Then we're going to do one more drawing on this, where we're going to have them now move a different limb, right? So last drawing. All right, let's do it. Let's make one more shift. So now they're going to keep their arms where they are, and they're going to do a different shift. All right, so now they've got a leg which is shifted out there. And let's finish off this drawing now. So another erasure, and for me, it's a massive change now. Here, Rachel has dropped that leg. So I'm going to, again, rub back, but I'm seeing all of those layers, the ghost, the palimpsest of those previous drawings. All right, this is going to be the final go at this drawing. So this is where you're going to bring it in and finish it up. All right, another minute. We're calling this one done. All right, y'all, give it a go. All right, you guys are doing fantastic. Well done. Another few seconds. And we're out. All right, shake it out, y'all. Well done. All right, that was a very difficult pose. Atticus and Rachel, bravo, y'all. Okay, now, believe it or not, is it 5 to 8? It's like 5 to 8. Where does our time go, y'all? All right, we are going to go into our final drawing, though, and we're going to blast right through 8 o'clock for this final drawing. All right, so the first drawing we did was subtractive drawing, using Erasure to pull out the contour and also to pull out the light. The second drawing we did was that a way of showing movement, a way of showing the different gestures of the body by erasing and redrawing and erasing and redrawing. So we're getting layering and transparency and seeing those traces of the palimpsest, the history of the drawing and the building of the drawing. We're now going to combine those two methods for this final drawing. So we're going to combine a subtractive technique together with a contour technique. And we're going to do this as a silhouette drawing. This is a really beautiful way of drawing too if you've never done it before. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a contour drawing of the body. We're then going to put a wash, just like we did for the first drawing, but inside the contours of that body. So we're essentially going to create a kind of a silhouette wash. And then we can erase back into that silhouette by pulling out line and light. But then we're also going to bring in some movement and redrawing within that, that body too. So we're going to combine the first method we used and the second method we used. This is a really good way of training your eye, not only for seeing light and shadow, but it's a way of creating a type of mark which you won't typically create if you only work additively. If you only work by bringing material to your surface, you'll get a certain kind of mark. And you might get a great variety of marks that way. But if you bring in Erasure and these subtractive marks, it'll open up a whole new toolkit for you, a whole new vocabulary of marks that you can add to your drawings. All right, so let's get a fresh sheet of paper. Let me get mine set up here. There we go. Get that out of the way. Okay, now, when you have your fresh sheet of paper all ready to go and set up, we're gonna have Atticus and Rachel take their final pose. But again, they're gonna take a pose into which they are going to introduce a bit of movement and a bit of variety, all right? But in this final pose, again, you may choose to draw just Rachel, you may choose to draw just Atticus, or you might choose to draw both of them. The cats just went nuts outside. I don't know if y'all could hear that or not. But you may choose to draw one or the other or both. It's up to you, but know that you'll only have a total of about 10 to 15 minutes, let's say 15, about 15 minutes of total drawing time here. So make sure that you keep that's got to be picked up on the microphone, all right? There's some cat drama happening outside my studio right now. Make sure that you think about what you can get accomplished in this 10 to 15 minutes. So if the two bodies are going to be too much for you to handle, just focus on one or the other. All right, so let's take our final pose of the evening, y'all. All right. Rachel, let's keep your foot up because otherwise it'll get cut off there on the screen. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right, is that good? That comfortable? Okay, beautiful. All right, let's go into this pose now. Whether you do one or whether you do both, what I want you to start with is a very, very simple line contour. All right, so looking at both of them and the way they're sitting in space, again, I'm going to focus on Rachel because I've got a clear view of her and Atticus is hidden behind my sheet for me. So work with a really quick, let's say 2-3 minutes max of getting that body in space. All right, everybody set? All right, let's go. Again, don't focus too much on detail, just the overall layout of the body. You'll have plenty of time to work and rework this drawing, so if you don't hit every bit of it in this first go, it's all right. All right. All right, you should have by now almost finished that very, very quick contour of the body there in space. All right. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds on that. Okay. And as soon as you're done with that contour, then you're going to come back with your graphite or your charcoal, and you're going to then block in within those contours the silhouette of the body. And while you're doing that, you can continue to correct shape a little bit if you want to. If we had time tonight, I would love to introduce charcoal wash. Charcoal is water soluble, and so for those of you who are working in charcoal, there's a beautiful way of doing this kind of erasure drawing where you just work with a brush and clean water, and you wash back into the charcoal too. All right, now once you have that contour, you should be moving on to your silhouette. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to block in, and I'm going to go right across all my interior lines. So I'm not going to be precious about those lines that were inside the body at all. I'm just going to wash right over them. All right. And again, this is your chance if you need to do a little bit of correcting of shape, you can. All right. And what you should wind up with then is just an overall silhouette of the body like that, which is washed in. Keep that really, really quick and loose. For those of you working in pencil, work on the side of that pencil. And if you're working in pencil, you might have to work it in two directions, in a vertical stroke and a horizontal stroke, or two diagonal strokes that are overlapping and intersecting to get enough graphite down there on your paper, depending on how soft your graphite is. Okay, now, once you got it at that stage, your shoulder okay? Okay, once you got it at that stage, now you can start working subtractively. All right, so you've got it set up like that. Now what you can do is start cutting back into it. So I'm coming with my eraser now, and I can do two things. I can cut the outside edge by erasing back to that silhouette, and I can also erase on the interior of the form to get light and shadow. All right, so and I'm going to do both. So I'm going to come back in now, and I'm actually redrawing now Rachel's arm by erasing back up against that silhouette. And I'm going to redraw the shape of her hip the same way. So you're erasing up against the silhouette to get the shape. Again, it's a very, very different way of drawing, but it's a really instructive way of drawing too. Okay, and it's thinking about the body as this, not just as a collection of sort of mechanical forms, but as this organic thing which is growing organically as you draw. All right, and then you can also start to come in now and start to erase out the light in the form. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to preserve the black of those stockings by not erasing back into those stockings. All right, just keep scrubbing. Okay, you got about 2 minutes of scrubbing ahead of you. So you should start to see the form emerge now through that erasure. Now what I'm doing is squinting again, squint, squint, squint your eyes. When my daughters come down and see me in my studio, oftentimes they ask me why I'm drawing with my eyes closed, and I'm not. Well, sometimes I am, but usually I'm not. I'm just squinting. So I'm focusing on the light. I'm actually going to draw the mask in there too. All right. Now, if it's actually starting to look a little strange and almost even skeletal, that's a good thing. That means you're doing well. All right. Okay, now, once you've got that erased back out like that, and you've got the light, now movement body, okay? Is that microphone still working? Yep, okay, good. Now we're gonna do a movement of the body. And now what we're gonna have is we're gonna have both, now it's gonna get complicated because we're gonna have both Atticus and Rachel shift their upper bodies, okay? So they're now gonna make a fairly major movement and shift of their upper bodies. All right, so go for it, y'all. So bringing their upper bodies, so Rachel's coming up like that, good. And Atticus twisting, perfect. Now what you're going to do is redraw that in contour. All right, so because I've got Rachel, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come around here, and now I'm gonna bring a contour line in and redraw her leaning forward now. So I'm still gonna see the previous drawing that's pulling back like that, and I'm gonna see the new drawing pulling over. For those of you who have Atticus, you had the previous drawing where he was turning towards you, and now he's rotating away from you. And so now redraw that contour back in. Okay. And it's just establishing a very different type of logic for the drawing. Okay, and even though her hand is winding up at almost exactly the same place that it was before. I'll try to stay out of your way again so you can see me working. Can't wait to see these drawings, y'all. I know Shannon will mention it again at the end, but you got to share them so we can see what you guys have done. And if you have drawings that you did over the last 2 weeks that you haven't shared with us, feel free to do that too. We're thinking about the body now as something which isn't singular, right? We're thinking about the body as something which is plural. It's not being contained. There's one very coherent and legible body, but we're seeing it as a combination of movements and forms. All right, and you've got about 5 more minutes. Now, as you are developing up this second drawing, which overlaps that first drawing, now what I want you to do is be playful. invent, be unruly yourselves. Think now about where you might want to bring back in that first body and emphasize it, and where you might want to bring some shade and tone into the second body. So you're really seeing this now as this vibration of these two bodies, which are one body, which are overlapping. And for those of you out there, it could get quite distorted. It could get quite grotesque and monstrous. It could be quite elegant in the way that you read it moving through time. But now take about 5 more minutes and have a little bit of a play with what you've got there. So for example, I could come in because I've got light on Rachel's back, and I could come in and cut back across my first drawing with that light, right, to push it back in space. So it seems to be coming out from behind, and the other body seems to be overlapping in front. So now that you've got those two bodies intersecting, start to weave them together in interesting ways, in graphic ways. And more than anything, follow your gut. Be intuitive, all right? There's no proper way to do this. It's all your very particular and idiosyncratic approach to it. All right, I think. And again, you can see I'm working back and forth, working with my eraser and with my charcoal, and just swapping back and forth really quickly. So you draw some, you erase some. You draw some, you erase some. All right, we've got about, oh geez, we are up against it, y'all. Let's say 2 more minutes. Oh, this is such a good pose. I want to keep drawing. All right, let's bring it home. 1 more minute, y'all. Don't be afraid of all those beautiful erasure marks that you're getting in there. That's part of what's going to make this drawing really sing. All right, I'm going to give you all 30 more seconds. Got that beautiful light. Look at that light falling across Rachel's back and turning all around Atticus's shoulder, down through his rib cage there and into his thigh. Fantastic. And again, these are being recorded. These will go up on YouTube in a couple of days too. So you could always come back and look at this pose again and rework it and rework these different movements. And we're out. TikTok, y'all. All right, it is customary in every life drawing class to thank our models. So wherever you are at home, if you could please join me in thanking Atticus and Rachel, not only for this evening, but working through this entire series with us. Thank you so much, y'all. Fantastic. All right, so let me just do a quick recap of what we did throughout this whole series and what we did tonight. And then hopefully we'll have a chance to do this again in the future, and I'll get a chance to work with all y'all again. And please don't be a stranger. I'm easy to find. I know a lot of you have been sharing your stuff with Qagoma and with me personally through Instagram and other means like that. I love it. I love it. And I love getting to see what you're doing, and what you're sharing is absolutely fantastic. So through this whole series, this draw along series, what we've been trying to do is not just introduce you to some of the basic academic methods and means of life drawing, but really to start thinking about the different ways that life drawing and these different methods of drawing can enhance and enable you to make different types of marks and approach the body in wholly new ways. So whether that was the academic citing and measuring of anatomy and proportion we did in the first day, or whether it was the first week, or whether it was the gestural mark making and all that beautiful sense of the gesture and contour that we did in the second week, or tonight working with Erasure and starting to think of the productive capacities of the subtractive, right, and the rubbing back of things. It's just a way of you starting to expand your own repertoire in terms of mark making and drawing, and hopefully taking quite a lot of pleasure out of it too, because I hope you enjoy and love life drawing as much as I do, and working with brilliant people like Rachel and Atticus. All right, thank you very much. Thank you to the Qagoma team. I'm going to hand this back over to Shannon now. We're going to kill my video, but again, this has been my absolute pleasure, and I hope I'll see all y'all really soon. All right, thanks. Good night.